Our first speaker is Beth Campbell Hetrick. She comes from Gettysburg College, and she'll be talking about the theory, spreadsheets, and maps, a first-year seminar course on the mathematics of voting.
Good morning, everyone. Let me get my slides up here, and we'll dive right in. Okay, so we'll make this big. Okay, we will jump right in here. Theory, Spreadsheets, and Maps, a first-year seminar course on the mathematics of voting. I want to start by saying thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. I'm very excited and I'm in good company. I see some familiar names in the participants list and some faces here on screen, and I'm excited that you're here to hear about my experience with this first-year seminar course. Before I jump into the specifics of the course, I thought it might be nice for you to know a little bit about how I came to be teaching this course, because I'm relatively new to it. I have taught it for the past 3 years. What happened, how this came to be, was that after the 2016 US presidential election and the events that followed, I found myself feeling like I needed to do something. Things were happening and I felt like I needed to be part of something to work to protect the values that I hold dear or advance those causes. And around that same time, gerrymandering was really having a moment in the national spotlight here in the United States. In my home state of Pennsylvania, an advocacy group called Fair Districts PA was starting a big push for information awareness about gerrymandering and a push for reform, redistricting reform here in the state of Pennsylvania. And as some of you may know, may remember, in the summer of 2017, Moon Duchin, together with another group of mathematicians, the Metric Geometry and Gerrymandering Group, was putting together a week-long summer conference at Tufts on redistricting and pulling together people from different disciplines, including mathematicians and political scientists. And those ideas, that work really resonated with me. And it got me thinking about what I could do. And I was honored to attend one of the regional workshops of that gerrymandering workshop in the fall of 2017, the Duke workshop on geometry, metric geometry and gerrymandering and the situation. And again, pulling together political scientists, lawyers, mathematicians to talk about the issues. And all of that led to the creation of this first-year seminar course. And I started teaching it for the first time in the fall of 2018. So that's how it came to be. Let me see if I can advance my slides. Okay, so first, a little bit of background about Gettysburg College. We are a liberal arts college undergraduate located in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, with about 2,500 students, a little bit over 2,500 students starting this year. And we have a first-year seminar program. It is now required, just in the last year or so, it is required for each first-year student to participate in the first-year seminar program. The program has an emphasis on active participation. Courses are capped at 16 students to facilitate discussion, active participation, a connection among the students and with the professor. And as another piece of the program, all of the students in a given first-year seminar course live in the same residence hall. So an emphasis here too on some sense of community right from the start. As for my particular course, the student composition has been interesting. As I mentioned, the cap is 16. I've had healthy enrollment all 3 semesters that I've taught. 15 students the first semester, 13 the second, and 15 again this past fall. It has been interesting to me to notice the gender balance in the course. My enrollment has skewed very heavily toward men. In fact, the semester, the second time I taught it, the semester with 13 students, they were all men. So very much heavier on the male side. And I don't know why. But I think it's curious and worth pointing out. Another piece that might be helpful to understand here is to understand the background and the interests of the students taking the course. It's quite mixed. So there are some mathematics students who go on to major in math or mathematical economics. There are some students who have chosen a major in computer science, maybe business. There are also quite a lot of students who are interested in political science and who go on to major in political science. So it is at its core a math course. However, the audience is quite mixed, as I mentioned, with a lot of students interested in political science taking the course. I chose to have homework, quizzes, and a final project making up the bulk of the work in the course. The homework is roughly weekly. Every 1 to 2 weeks, students are submitting a written homework assignment. The quizzes are really just homework that you have to do all by yourself, as opposed to the other homeworks. They're not timed. It's a couple of short problems that build on the homework. And the final project is based on a student's topic of choice. I give them a starter list and they choose from that. And it includes both a paper and a presentation. Topics are among the ones that are fairly common, I think, on courses of mathematics and voting methods, apportionment methods, redistricting and gerrymandering, the Electoral College, and then some other topics as we go, whatever fits in. There's a lot with current events, as I'll say more later on. And I'm in good company here again with the participants and the speakers, my fellow speakers. Jonathan Hodge is the co-author of the textbook that I use for the course. I've got it pictured here. It's the second edition of the Mathematics of Voting and Election, a hands-on approach. It fits well with my teaching style. I like students to be actively engaged, and the book has lots of activities throughout the chapters that do just that, that prompt the students to think about things, to try things out, and to work on problems. So I often have them work on problems ahead of class, and we work on problems in class too. There's a lot that I can say. I'm so excited about this course, and there's a lot that I can say about the course and my experience and the ideas. I will focus on theory, spreadsheets, maps, and then overall discussion. And I know we've got a short time frame, so I'll buzz right through. So starting with theory. As I mentioned, it is at its core a mathematics course, and the students have varied backgrounds. It gives an opportunity to emphasize critical thinking skills for students to grow in their abstract reasoning skills. We talk a lot, especially at the beginning, about definitions, examples, counterexamples. I ask students to provide careful justifications. I don't say proofs at this point, but they have to provide careful justifications, and I push them really to sharpen those abstract reasoning skills. And the first time through, I realized I had to make some adjustments. That first semester through, I thought, oh, I'll just buzz through lots of this content here in the first couple weeks. And I realized after about 2 weeks, the blank stares I was getting, the difficulty students were having with the homework exercises, I had to slow down. And so I slowed down. We had several math days and really broke down the ideas and thought carefully about what it means to satisfy a definition, what it means to have an example or a counterexample, how we carefully justify situations when it's appropriate to use a counterexample, situations when we need to say things more generally. So again, really pushing on those abstract reasoning skills. I supplemented with some of the material in the text. The example I have here is an example of questions I ask, sort of a flow chart. What's the question we ask to decide whether or not this definition is met? And I bring this up, it's relatively simple, but it's an example of the sort of thing that needed to be reinforced in class. You know, just because you have one example where, say, an increase in rank on individual ballots does not change anything about the societal preference order, that's not enough to decide that the system is monotone. So really emphasizing whether it's okay to say yes sometimes, or does it have to be always no, and that sort of thing. So in this case, if the answer is always no, so what's the question we ask, and then what do we do based on our answers? Illustrating some of the sorts of things that we talk about in class. Moving right along, spreadsheets, but this is broader, spreadsheets and other tools and skills that this course gives an opportunity for us to explore and work on. Spreadsheets and data is a big one. And this came up very naturally the first time through when we hit the section on apportionment methods. I have pictured here on the screen a template for a spreadsheet that we can use to compute the US apportionment using the population data from 1794. And there are problems in the text the students work through on just this. You can see down at the bottom, I've got different tabs as we work through some different apportionment methods. The first time I taught it, I find myself thinking, wow, this would be so much easier with a spreadsheet. I don't have to do the same calculation over and over again. When I asked my students, though, no one had done that. And that has repeated itself actually in the following semesters too. So it gives me a chance to bring in spreadsheets as a tool for working with data. And that launches into a bigger skill, right? The ability to use tools to work with data, big data. Here we just have these original 13 colonies. Later, though, I have the students do an assignment where they work with population data, census data from 1990, and explore the results of the 2000 US presidential election under different apportionment methods. So they have to go find data, they've got to put it into a spreadsheet to work with it. So it's an opportunity, a very authentic opportunity to give students the experience in working with data, exploring different scenarios, determining outcomes, manipulating to find the information that we need. And that's been exciting. And in my experience, the students really are mixed in their own background experience in working with spreadsheets as a tool. Some of them were quite comfortable setting up formulas and filling things in. For others, this was pretty new. So it was exciting to give them a chance, as I said, to authentically work with this in class, really as a tool that helped them better understand and better reach conclusions. And hopefully they can carry on then in future coursework. Again, more broadly speaking about skills, this course as a first-year seminar course especially, and with the research they do at the end for their final project, gives the opportunity to work on literacy skills, communication skills. This is a skill, these are skills that are so important now as much as ever. Literacy skills, finding, evaluating, citing sources. This semester we did a session with the librarian on practice paraphrasing appropriately, and again, citing appropriately. All 3 semesters I've worked with one of our research and instructional librarians to coordinate sessions on these literacy skills for the students as part of class. And all throughout, they're working on their communication skills with all of our class discussions. At the end, they formally present their project to us. So again, lots of opportunities here to develop and enhance communication skills and presentation skills. Maps. Again, in working with data, that rolls right into the next topic, maps. I have had the opportunity to have students engage in map drawing, actually. This connects both the data and an opportunity to engage with the community, to be involved in the discussions that are happening now around us. As you may know, Pennsylvania is one of the states that comes up a lot in discussions of gerrymandering. So for better or for worse, for good of the course, I guess, we've got a lot of opportunities to tap into local events and to connect with local advocacy groups. So in particular, in my course, all 3 semesters, I have had the students participate in the Draw the Lines PA competition, sponsored by Draw the Lines. They have students and also adults, so there are different categories of entrants. In my case, students are working alone or together to draw maps for the state US congressional districts. So you can see here pictured is a map drawn in the spring 2019 competition by Matt Granito, who went on to be the statewide runner-up that semester for the higher ed competition. My students have been quite successful. In fact, you notice Matt's map here was from spring 2019. He had won an honorable mention in fall 2018 with the map that he had drawn for the course and enjoyed the experience so much he went on to draw this one then in the next semester on his own to enter the contest again. And from the fall 2019 competition, another one of my students, Carter Hansen, was the second place finish for our division, the Western Division for higher ed. So it's been quite exciting. And we've had other students get honorable mentions too. It's, again, an authentic chance to engage with the data. We've had a mapathon a couple of times with people from Draw the Lines to invite more of the campus community in and to have a work session for the class. There are other ways to connect with the community too. And I am excited that all 3 semesters we've had a guest speaker come in from Fair Districts PA, another advocacy group that's pushing for education on the issue of gerrymandering, the current state in Pennsylvania, and pushing for reform. So we've had a speaker come in and talk to our class, one of the coordinators from Dauphin County, who is herself a Gettysburg College alumna. So again, a special connection there. So that's been exciting. And discussions, and maybe of all of the pieces of the course, this one permeates the course, and I've been so excited to see how well it has gone, honestly. We have had many rich conversations and always opportunities to connect to current events, which I find really invigorating. And it's so different from my other math classes. Each semester, there are news stories that I can link to and have the students read, and we can talk about in class. The example I put on the slide here is a graphic from an NPR story just after the US presidential election this past fall. And it was at the time in the course, and we're talking about redistricting and gerrymandering. And the textbook asks the question, is it reasonable to assume uniform partisan swing? That if the vote shifts in a particular state, is it a reasonable assumption to assume that the vote shifts in that way in each of the districts? And so you can see from the graphic what actually happened here in Pennsylvania, comparing the 2016 presidential election to the 2020 presidential election. So we have a chance to actually look at some data again and see what we think. So is that happening in practice? And then we also talk about the practicalities of many of these pieces. Well, so maybe that's not the reality, but when it comes to trying to get some information or trying to model some scenarios, is this a reasonable thing to do? What do you think? And with many, many of the options that we discuss, we talk about pros and cons. What are the other consequences of certain decisions we might make, say for considering alternatives to the Electoral College? Who do these decisions impact? And that ties into the next piece I have on here, sharing personal experiences. I think it's been incredibly valuable for the students to hear from each other about what the voting experience is like in different states. It is so different from one state to another in terms of access to voting, absentee voting, the mail-in ballot process, for example. When can you vote? Is there early voting? How does this work? And again, how would changes in one area affect people? And this rolls into another issue, consideration of social justice issues. How do the current systems, the voting systems, the apportionment methods, how does the districting that's in place in certain states, how does that affect different groups of people? Who is included? Who is marginalized? How would a change impact different groups? We can talk about the history too. In fact, the first time I taught the course, I had a political science professor from our college come in and talk about racial gerrymandering, to provide some background on that. So there are lots of launching points for really rich conversations. And again, personal experiences to be shared, social justice issues that can and should be discussed, lots of current events that we can talk about. And I'm really grateful to say that my students, all 3 semesters, have been very respectful. We have had these meaningful conversations. We've touched on from time to time sensitive issues. And my students have all been respectful, polite with each other. We haven't had any instances, at least that I know of, where anyone got aggressive or was attacking another student or spoke badly about a group of people or anything like that. And we navigated right through the 2020 election season too. I always teach this course in the fall semester, so it's always election season here in the US. I was not sure how it would all go with the climate in 2020, but we did it. We navigated successfully through that with all of the things that were happening, brought in lots of current events. And I believe together with the students, we created a class climate where people were able to speak out again and share different viewpoints. What really matters, what's important, whether or not you would advocate for making that change. And in some cases, even some very, very personal experiences were shared about voting and the effects, the impact of these decisions or the potential impacts of these choices. And I think that's been incredibly valuable. And again, much different from the other mathematics courses that I teach. So it's been incredibly rewarding. And as I said, motivating, encouraging for me, um, invigorating to teach this course and to be able to have those kinds of conversations. And with that, I'll wrap up. I want to make sure we have time for questions. As I said, there's so much more I can say probably about all of this, but I want to keep us on time and have a chance to hear from you. So I'll end with acknowledgments. My thanks to the Institute for Mathematics and Democracy. I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here today speaking with you and sharing this experience. My thanks also to Gettysburg College, to my department, the mathematics department, who wholeheartedly supported the development of this course and my teaching it, even though it meant that I would be not teaching a math course. So teaching this in place of another math course, and to the college and the first year seminar program also for supporting the development of this course and for offering it to the students. And my thanks to all of you. Thank you for attending. Thank you for listening today.
All right. Thank you so much. Wow, that was just amazing, Beth. I really appreciate that talk. That was so terrific. Also, I appreciate everyone in the audience. A few folks at the end here were chiming in with questions. One of the things I forgot to say at the very beginning was we're going to hold questions till the end. And if you have questions, you can put them in the chat. And happily, that's exactly what happened. So I'm going to start there, actually. Maura, I believe that you asked the first question in the chat. Would you like to unmute yours? Or let's see, can we? Do you have the ability to unmute yourself?
Yes.
Oh, great, great.
I apologize for not turning my camera on.
No worries.
I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about the final projects and also if there are any resources that you've developed that you'd be willing to share.
Definitely. I have, for example, one of the things I have is a list of final project ideas, and I'd be happy to share that with anyone. A lot of the project ideas are use exercises from the book actually as jumping off points. And then some are other ideas that I've put together. And I always have an option for the students too, to give you a sense of what they look like, what the students choose to do. I've had students research voting methods in different countries. So we've had students talk about voting in Germany, for example. That's a great one to bring in for an example of how what voting looks like in another country or another system in place. I've had students talk about the selection process for Best Picture for the Oscars. I've had students talk about methods of fair division. I had a student explore power indices. There's a chapter in the book on that, and we don't get to it in class, but one of my students was particularly interested in that, and a comparison of power and coalitions and how that plays out. Students have explored, and a couple of these ideas I'm thinking are directly from the book, explored judging in figure skating, for example, and how that works, and also a deeper dive into some of the gerrymandering or the redistricting that's taking place in certain states. We're located in Pennsylvania. I usually have a couple students from Maryland. So I remember that first semester I had students talk about the situation, the gerrymandering situation or the districting situation in Maryland. So there's a chance then to connect to something closer to home. Students have talked about single transferable vote used in Australia, for example. So those sorts of things. And a little bit more about the project. I'm not sure if this is quite what you want to know about. I have them choose the topic and prepare both a paper and a presentation. And logistics wise, they present during our final exam slot. And the first semester, I had the talks a little bit longer, so we actually used the last day of classes as well as our final exam period for that. And something else actually that could come out of the final projects as it did this past semester, it could be a launch point then for future research, for example, or just an extension. I have a student who took the course with me this last semester and was looking at apportionment methods and fairness and what's fair and what method to use. And he wrote a computer program. He's a computer science major. So he wrote a computer program to quickly calculate the results under different apportionment methods, and then even further to keep track of how the apportionment compared to the quota and how often the small states got their upper quota or their lower quota, under certain methods, or when the large states got their upper quota or their lower quota under certain methods. And his program could do all this very quickly. So he used it to generate lots of data and then draw some conclusions from that. And last year, I had a student from Colorado, very interested. He had in political science and the process. And he asked me to work with him on summer research, a really deep dive into gerrymandering and power of the people and elections and that sort of thing. So it can be a great launch for future work too.
And just one last follow-up. Did you sort of divide up the project into, pieces that they had to do, or was it just one?
Great question. Some scaffolding would be helpful, I think. I had them choose their topic ahead of time, so I had a chance to check in with them about the topic at least, make sure everybody had selected a topic a couple weeks ahead. The first semester, I only did that. And then when I got the final papers and listened to the presentations, in one case in particular, I remember thinking, oh no, that is not what I thought the project was going to be. And if only we had talked about it, a week ahead of time. And so the second time through, I added another checkpoint. I added an optional, strongly encouraged rough draft checkpoint. So that gave me another time to see if the project was what I thought on track. So I've done that.
That's great. We may have time for maybe one more short question and answer. Heather, I know that you asked about assessment. You may or may not feel like that question has been answered. If not, you can ask if anybody else has a question, of course.
Yeah, obviously your thorough response to Moira's sort of covered that. I apologise, I'm not turning my camera on either. I'm in Australia and it's the middle of the night.
Oh.
I guess just to add to what you already covered, which is wonderful, I'm curious what sort of assessment rubric you used. And I love the fact that you introduced Excel as a tool and so on. Did you sort of explicitly assess that or have a specific requirement for the project to sort of explicitly incorporate that side of things, or were they sort of left more freely open to explore things? So yeah, just curious how you assess them when they could have done such a diverse range of things.
Right. So I have a general rubric of the things I look for. So when it comes to the talk, for example, I assess them on both the content and the presentation. And then it's similar, and I'd be happy to share this if you're interested, a similar sort of guideline for their paper, the mathematical content and the presentation. And here again, a chance to emphasize those literacy skills. I'm explicitly looking for appropriate citations. That was another thing I learned that first semester through. I had a couple students who turned in a paper with a works cited section at the end, but not a single in-text citation. And I was alarmed. So we really doubled down on those literacy skills and the work with a librarian, trying to emphasize the importance of appropriate citations. So Heather, as for the explicit assessment on a spreadsheet or use of a tool or something like that, I have a couple of homework assignments where I ask them to submit their spreadsheet, if they use one, to submit as part of the presentation, for the homework assignment. And when it comes to that US presidential election 2000, I think it would be hard to do without. So in my experience, they have all used a spreadsheet. And I think I do explicitly direct them to do that when they're working with the data from 50 states and adding in DC there to the mix. But for the final project, it's a bit more open because, as you say, there's quite a range. Some of them are doing sometimes some fantastic original math, coming up with examples on their own. I'm thinking of the student who did the project on power and coalitions. And other times it's more expository. They're finding out about gerrymandering in Maryland, but they're pulling from resources. They're not doing their own computations. So the rubric or the guidelines I use are deliberately open-ended to allow for them to excel, to succeed, regardless of which path they take.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much. I'd love to see some of those resources and stuff if you're willing to share them. But thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
All right. If everybody would thank Beth again for an amazing talk. Excellent. Thank you so much. We're going to roll right into our next speaker. The next speaker